Hello everyone, and welcome to Chapter 6 in Excel here. What I would do now is I'm going to go through, we'll do the sales analysis project, and we'll walk through that and explain why we're doing some of the things you've read about in Chapter 6 and see how we use those skills that you're reading about and actually apply those into a scenario from this project here. As with all of our projects, we get the same screen, and we're going to download the materials that are necessary for us to complete this project. And as I said, I like to do these individually rather than clicking the download all files, and I'm going to download my instructions and my starter file. I'm not too worried about this helpful image, but you may want to use that at home to have as a reference point at where we need to end up. So with those two downloaded, I'm going to close this. I'm going to leave this up in the background so when I come back I can choose my file to submit and submit that. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my starter instructions and my starter file. With the instructions loaded, I'm going to enable editing of this just so I can view this a little bit larger. I'm going to increase my view just like I do in class to be able to read the instructions much easier as we perform the steps. We've already downloaded the file. We've got that opened up, so we know that step 1 is complete here. Now we're going to move on to where we get points. So here, database functions allow us to specify criteria in one or more fields to explore the data with ease. When this is all done, the criteria must be evaluated to true for the record to be included in our calculation. Using a table for the Excel database allows you to add new records to the database easily, and any database functions used on the table will automatically update. With Excel, we do have some basic database functionality in that, but remember, when it comes to large data, you should always use a database. So let's take a look at what we need to do here and apply some of those database skills here in the Excel, the spreadsheet software. So on our sales data worksheet, well, there's a step, so I'm going to go ahead and jump over there and make sure I'm on the sales data worksheet. I'm going to enable that. I can see what I'm working with here. I've got my title. Here's my header row, even though this is just raw right now. We haven't converted this into a table, and I've got all my data. Alright, so we're on the right worksheet, and we're going to convert the plain data set to an Excel table. Once we do that, we're going to name the Excel table sales data, and then for our third step, we're going to create a name range called sales database from all that data. And we're going to also include our column headings or our header rows. So we're going to go ahead and jump over there and do that now. We're going to convert that plain data to an Excel data. So I'm going to click here in the header row, and I'm just going to click here in cell A3. Once I click there, I'm going to convert this into a database table. So if we click here in the cell, now we're going to go up to the Insert tab of our ribbon. Once we click on that, we're going to jump down here to our Tables group, and we're going to click, you guessed it, Table. Now you can see I've got the whole group selected here, and it is asking, do I want to include the headers that is recognized in our table. So of course we want to include that, so we're going to hit OK. And now you can see we have our drop down functions here for each of our headers that we can use for different database functions. So we've got our table converted into, or our raw data converted into a table. Let's go ahead and do the next step in our instructions there, which was to create our use our name manager or the name box to create a named range for this area. We're going to call it sales database. So I can either come up here and do it, and I can just type it in there, or I can go and do it in my formulas tab. If I click the formulas tab, here's my name manager, here's define name. I can click on define name, and I can call this group the sales database. Hit OK. Now if you go into your name manager, you can see we have sales database there. So we have our table created. We've given it a name range. Now let's look and see what our next step is here. The next step we're to do, now that we've done all this, is we're going to copy just the column headings from the sales data table and paste them onto the database tools worksheet starting in cell A1. So let's jump over there and do that real quick. So we are going to select only this row, copy that, go to the database tools in cell A1, paste those there, and now we have those column headings there as it instructed. If we go back to our instructions, I'm going to scroll down here just a little bit. Now we are going to, on that same worksheet, database tools, we're going to cell B5 and type in the words net revenue. Once you have that typed in, we'll jump back right over here to our instructions. So right here in cell B5, when you click that, check your name box, make sure you're in the right location. We're going to put that information here for net revenue. Hit the enter key, and that is the field that we're going to use to get our sum, average, count, max, and min. So as a database, we're going to come back over here into our net revenue, and then we're going to use those different functions like sum and average and those to just look at this column of information and do the calculations. If we wanted to use gross revenue, we could type in gross revenue and do the functions here. So let's go ahead and go back to our database tools. We're going to go back to our instructions worksheet, and now we're going to look at the rest of that instruction. As you can see in cells B7 through B11, use the appropriate database functions to calculate the sum, average, count, max, and min of that net revenue field, as I just said, using this range A1 through L2 as our criteria for each of these functions. So we'll jump back over there and do that now. So obviously to do the sum, we're going to put in for a database, because we're going to be using the database we just created, we're going to put in dsum. Actually, we should put our equal sign first. dsum. You can see there is dsum. Database sum. What's the name of the database? Well, we just created our database, which was called sales database, so you can start typing that in. See, it recognized it right away as I start to type in sales database, so I'm going to double click that. Now it says what are the fields or the criteria. So I'm going to put a comma here to get that next piece of information. Well, for this one we're going to be looking at B5 is our field that we want to use. And what's the criteria? The criteria is that name range, or that cell range of A1 through L2. I'm going to end my parenthesis here. So we're using a database sum of the sales database, which is what we created back here. And then we are going to reference the field net revenue. So whatever we have typed in here, we want to reference that. So like I said, if we changed it to gross revenue, the values here would change. And then where do we want to get that information from? A1 through L2. So if there's any kind of criteria that we want to meet, we would put criteria up here, and that would affect our sum. If we wanted to just get the net revenue for a certain employee, we would put something here like equals whatever an employee ID might be. So we've got our basic function built. Hit enter, and now it went over. It said, okay, go look at the column net revenue on the sales data and get the sum of this information. If we wanted to check this, we could do a sum function. $4,705.90. Looks like it works. So we know that our function works as expected. So we'll come back over here and we will build the functions for here. So go ahead and do that now. So you're going to use the same structure. You're just going to use a different function when you're building these. Equals dsum. Which database? Sales database. What's our criteria field? B5. And then we're going to put in the A1 through L2 again. And do your count, max, and min the same way. Go ahead and build those and come back and make sure they match up with mine. But before you do that, hopefully you said, hey, wait a minute, why are those numbers different? The average wouldn't be the same. And that's just because we need to use the actual function for average. So format's the same, it's just for, instead of dsum, it's going to be the whole word for average. And you can see it detects it right away. So when we go to do the next one, we will do a decount and the exact same format. So make sure you go ahead and do these next three. Okay, with your functions created, they should look just like this. Decount, same parameters. Dmax, same parameters. And dmin. And just if you want to check those, okay, we've got $1.56 is our minimum. We go back to sales database. We look through here. And we can see that $1.56 is our minimum, and it looks like our maximum is clearly $11.31 and 30 cents, and that's exactly what we got. So it looks like our functions work as expected. Let's go back to our directions and see what it wants us to do now. It says, all right, all the database functions have been created. Yay! Use the criteria area to limit the calculations. That header row at the top, our criteria area. Record or only use those records with the transaction dates greater than 11/15/22 and when the payment field is Apple Pay. So we're going to go back there, we're going to put in this date for transaction date, and in the payment column we're going to put in Apple Pay. So 11/15/22 and then Apple Pay. So we see there's Apple Pay and our transaction date is right here. So just put in greater than 11/15/2022. Then here you can see we've got a criteria. Our formulas we're looking for that, and it automatically did it for us. Now we're going to put in Apple Pay and we'll see our values change once again. And we can see that now there's should only be 4 transactions that have the words Apple Pay in them. If we come back over here, and they have to meet the other criteria as well. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 transactions, but are the dates greater than 11/15/22? Which ones of those are? Those are not. That's not. That's not. That is. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So we know our functions are working. The next thing it wanted us to do in our instructions is to now change the field being used in our calculations from net revenue to total discounts. So make sure you change that. So if we go back to our database, type in total discounts here, we will see our values change again as soon as we hit the enter key, and we did, because now we looked for a different criteria field. We're using the total discounts field, and you can see that there is only a count of 4 there. So if we come back over here, total discounts that meet our criteria, so greater than 11/15/22, we should only see 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that looks like it did exactly what we expect it to. So our functions work. We did everything as expected. So that should be all that we were looking for through step 2. Alright, let's move on to step 3 in our next video.